On the night of October 29, 2022, a devastating crowd crush shocked the world in Itaewon, South Korea. In a narrow alley, hundreds of people were packed together in layers, compressed so tightly that rescuers couldn't pull them out. They could only watch helplessly as one person after another stopped breathing. By the end, 158 people had died in this tragedy. This became South Korea's deadliest disaster since the Seoul ferry sinking in April 2014. Tragically, many of the Itaewon victims were the same generation as those high school students who died on the Seoul, and this disaster was completely preventable. So, how did it happen? Let's go back to that day in Itaewon. Itaewon isn't just a single street. It's a district covering about 1.37 square kilometers in Seoul's Yongsan district, located on the eastern slope of Namsan Mountain. It's one of Korea's most famous commercial and tourist areas, filled with bars, shops, and restaurants. Home to a large expat community and popularized by Korean dramas, it's where young people love to hang out. The area's name has dark origins. It's located near Yongsan Garrison, the United States' most important military base in Korea. To serve American soldiers, the surrounding area developed a red light district, leading to many unintended pregnancies among Korean women. Because many needed abortions to keep working, locals nicknamed the area Itaewon, which sounds like abortion clinic in Korean. Some trace this history even further back to the Japanese invasions during the Ming Dynasty, when similar situations occurred. Either way, the Korean government found these names inappropriate and changed it to Itaewon, using similar-sounding characters. Despite being Seoul's most international district, Itaewon resembles an urban village. Illegal building extensions are everywhere, squeezing the spaces between structures smaller and smaller. Like much of Seoul, the terrain isn't flat. Many buildings sit on steep slopes. In previous years, Halloween in Itaewon never drew such massive crowds. But in 2022, Korea had just lifted its COVID-19 restrictions, so the turnout exploded. By afternoon, the streets were already packed, yet young people kept pouring in. By 8 p.m., the area was jam-packed with revelers in costumes, all heading toward World Food Street, a strip only 302 meters long. The problem was that buses and subway exits were concentrated on the south side, along Itaewon Row. To reach World Food Street from there, people had several routes to choose from. The alley where the tragedy occurred was at the south exit, close to both the bus stop and subway station entrances, making it a popular route. This alley was only 45 meters long but extremely narrow, averaging just 3 meters wide, with the actual walkable width under 2 meters. It got this narrow because buildings on both sides had been illegally expanded over the years. The Hamilton Hotel on the east side was particularly guilty. The alley used to be 5 meters wide, but the hotel's expansion cut that in half. Making matters worse, like World Food Street itself, this alley was on a slope, high on the north end, low on the south. The steepest section was coming down from World Food Street. Once the crowd exceeded a certain density, a crush became inevitable. As darkness fell, the alley grew more crowded. People coming from the subway wanted to use this route to reach World Food Street, while people in the food street wanted to cut through to catch the subway. Two streams of people collided. Some began pushing and shoving, making the already congested alley even more dangerous. At 6:34 p.m., someone called emergency services. Please send police to control the situation quickly. People are falling down. This is really serious. We think a crowd crush is about to happen. But police didn't send anyone. At 8:09 p.m., a second call came in. There are too many people at the subway exit. Many people have fallen and been injured. This time police responded, but they only directed traffic at the subway entrance before leaving. They paid no attention to conditions in the alley. According to police records later released, over the next 2 hours, 9 more calls came in reporting dangerous crowd conditions in Itaewon. But until the actual crush occurred, police never sent officers to manage or redirect the crowds. The nearby subway station wasn't closed either. By 10 p.m., over 100,000 people had packed into tiny Itaewon, with the alley having the highest crowd density in the entire district. At that point, any small incident would trigger a disaster. Research shows that when crowd density is below 2 people per square meter, people can move freely. At 3 to 5 people per square meter, movement becomes difficult, but people can still stay upright. But at 9 people per square meter or more, a deadly crush becomes likely. According to later surveillance analysis, a 5.7-meter section of the alley reached a terrifying density of 16 people per square meter. At 10:15 p.m., the crush began. The location was at the bottom of the slope. Some people lost their balance from pushing and fell. Those behind them were being pushed by others and couldn't stop, causing more people to fall in a domino effect. At the base of the slope, people were stacked 6 or 7 layers deep, but people at both ends of the alley, unaware of what was happening, kept pushing forward, compressing the crowd even tighter. Even people still standing began struggling to breathe. Women suffered especially because of their shorter height. Their chests were at the exact level where the pressure was greatest. As the compression increased, many began vomiting. One male survivor recalled, "I felt like hundreds of pounds were crushing me, but people behind kept pushing forward. Desperate screams surrounded me. Fortunately, I'm over 6 feet tall, so I could barely keep breathing. But a young woman next to me wasn't so lucky. She was lifted completely off her feet by the pressure. At first, she could cry for help, then only sob. Then she moaned in pain while vomiting. Then suddenly she went silent. When I looked at her again, she'd stopped breathing. Her entire face had turned purple. She died right next to me, and I could do nothing. I was so compressed I couldn't even move my arms. When I looked around, everyone's faces showed the same agony. I felt so hopeless. I was certain I was going to die. Even at this critical point, local police still hadn't sent help. The nearest fire station was only 200 meters away. The police station was even closer, just 130 meters. Even without the emergency calls, officers could have seen the situation just by walking outside. Yet, they all later claimed they had no idea what was happening. People in nearby shops tried pulling victims inside, but quickly discovered they couldn't budge them. The friction from the compression was too great. Though people were right there in front of them, they were powerless to help. Even if the shops had gotten people inside earlier, it wouldn't have prevented the tragedy. Too many people were flowing into the alley. The only difference would have been which group died. Only after receiving multiple calls about people unable to breathe did the Yongsan police contact the fire department and paramedics, but they didn't arrive on scene until 10:43 p.m., a full half hour after the crush began. Police immediately sealed off the alley's entrances and cleared out gawkers, which took another 10 minutes. Only then could rescue workers set up medical tents and begin treatment. But like the shop workers earlier, they couldn't pull people out either. At the bottom of the slope, people were stacked in layers, their faces already purple, and rescuers could only watch helplessly. It was even harder than pulling standing people. Eventually, some people near the walls managed to squeeze out, relieving the pressure enough that those underneath could finally be extracted, but their condition was terrible. For most, resuscitation came too late. They had already suffocated. Some had broken ribs from the crushing pressure. Rescuers were pulling out corpses, not survivors. The scene was horrific, leaving many with severe psychological trauma. The victims were mostly young people in their 20s, and most were women. The final count, 158 dead, including 3 Chinese citizens, and 196 injured. 2 months later, a survivor who suffered severe psychological trauma took their own life, bringing the government's official death toll to 159. Initially, Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol called it an accident rather than a disaster when speaking to foreign journalists, a distinction that would allow many to avoid accountability. Public Safety Minister Lee Sang-min claimed the problem couldn't have been solved by deploying police or firefighters in advance, also framing it as an unavoidable accident. But accidents are unpreventable by definition, and what happened in Itaewon was clearly both foreseeable and preventable. In fact, 2 days before Halloween, the Yongsan police had prepared a plan for crowd management and preventing crushes, but somehow that report was suppressed. After the disaster, higher-ups ordered Yongsan police to delete the report. Then things got stranger. The intelligence team deputy chief, who had suppressed the safety plan, suddenly committed suicide. That same day, a public department official also took their own life. These suspicious deaths turned public anger toward the Korean police, emergency response agencies, and even the Blue House. Victims' families took to the streets in protest, demanding an independent investigation and punishment for those responsible. The government insisted no one should be held accountable, but growing protests eventually forced them to open investigations into 28 people. In the end, only 6 received any punishment. I won't say much more about Korea's rescue capabilities. After watching this, you'll understand that the strange aspects of the Itaewon disaster aren't even the worst of it. Korean emergency response gives the impression of a system that doesn't belong in a developed nation. This tragedy offers us clear lessons. Avoid extremely crowded places whenever possible. If you must go, constantly monitor your surroundings and try to stay near the edges. But the best safety plan, the best preparation, is simply not going at all. Thanks for watching. See you next time.